Little emergency podcast action here on a Sunday morning, which been helped along by the daylight savings, so it's actually feels more like 10 a.m., but little podcasting with your coffee this morning. Very excited to do it because we had a ton of news this weekend. I figured that we might, but Dave, you're sitting there Friday night. I'm enjoying a nice leisurely evening with my wife on the couch, and then I get the alert on my phone. I am incredibly excited. She does not care. A tale as old as time. One of my favorite things that happens when we get these like massive news moments at those times of night. And we had a hell of a one on Friday night. We can say that.
See, that's the fun difference is I am marrying somebody who works in the industry. So
Yes.
Carmen and I just dropped everything we were doing and we were like charting out the value, deciding how we felt about it. I think we were like making dinner and had a TV show on and we just dropped everything for like 45 minutes to gauge how each other felt about this. It was great. And it's right in line. Like we joke about it for a reason. Like as soon as it's Friday night or as soon as you kind of feel like things are calming down, the Baltimore Ravens swing a major trade to, I don't even want to say like pry their window open, because I think even despite a pretty disappointing season in Baltimore, I think most people were probably still going to be pretty high on them when all was said and done. But talk about a swing for the fences to get you excited about a new regime. I mean, John Harbaugh leaves and all hell breaks loose. Like the biggest Ravens trade in history. I mean, I know that's only 31 years, but still, this is, even for a team that hasn't been unwilling to spend. You know, we talked about Roquan Smith recently. Like it's not that they've been unwilling to do it, but this still feels like another level when you're talking about the Baltimore Ravens addressing a problem.
There's no doubt. I think there are a few different layers to this where it feels unprecedented might be strong, but it definitely takes things into a new direction. I feel like for the market for players, for the Ravens in general, I think there are a lot of layers that we need to dig into here. But Derrik, I'm just curious, your initial reaction when you saw this. Like, what was your thought when you saw that Baltimore was the team that ended up willing to do this?
I mean, I think this is a team that, again, is closer than last year felt. I mean, they were extremely banged up on both sides of the ball, but definitely on defense. Their quarterback was hurt. Like, this to me feels like a team that is still at its core, like a 10-plus win team pretty consistently. And I think for them to realize that Lamar Jackson is 29 years old, which is not old, but given the way that he plays quarterback and the way that he might age compared to some other guys, like this next 3-year window is kind of it. And so for them to try to pry it open with Maxx Crosby, who I know last year was a down year, and, you know, I think some people have even made the argument that the year before was a down year. I still think he is a monster. Like, he is an Iron Man. Like, the way that he's going to defend the run for them is incredible. He's the best pass rusher they've had in, I don't even know how long. Like, it's been a very, very long time. So
like Terrell Suggs on the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Like, legitimately, like, it's been a very long time since they've had a player like this. So I'm incredibly jazzed for this. I think it's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, kudos to you, Maze. I saw you pumping your take from the week where, hey, but you were right. I mean, obviously it's a different player and you do something totally different, but a Jalen Phillips signing, the idea was to accomplish a similar goal and you just took it to a completely different stratosphere.
I don't think I deserve any credit for that. I think it just mostly speaks to where I thought their mindset might be. And that's my first reaction to this. It's funny that you guys go to, oh, they're still close and that's why they have to do this. My thought when you see a move like this is we're further away than we want to be. Like in terms of just being able to ride it out and stay the course and operate the way that we typically like to. And I think that's, to me, one of the more surprising elements of this is that, you know, the Ravens, especially at edge, if you look back over the last 10 or 15 years, they've just done such a good job of having this kind of assembly line where they would cycle through these day 2 to day 3 type of picks over and over and over again. And they'd let those guys hit free agency because they were comfortable being able to replenish that position. And it's kind of run dry. You know, the OA thing is interesting. Obviously, he's going to get paid a lot in free agency, but he's a specific type of player. You know, he's a little bit undersized. He's, you know, pass rushing is mostly what he's giving you. Typically, when they were hitting on those guys, I mean, Derrik, they were big-bodied players that really were able to give you a little bit of everything. And for them to just not have anybody like that come along in the last 4 or 5 years, I think just kind of speaks to, if not desperation, then urgency at the position in a way that we don't typically see with the Ravens. And that's what this feels like to me. This feels like them scrambling a little bit in ways that they don't often have to. And That's not even a criticism. I actually think it's probably the right approach with where they are right now, but that's the element of this that just doesn't feel like a typical Baltimore Ravens move to me.
Well, and I think part of the issue with why the edge stuff has run dry is they were drafting different players. Like you
Mhm.
said, like when they were drafting those third, fourth, fifth round guys, it was Pernell McPhee's and Zadarius Smiths. It was the 270 pounds. These
Judon.
guys, yeah, Matthew Judon. Like it's going to be these guys who are 260 to 275 pounds. We're going to put them at three tech sometimes. We're going to put them over a center. They're going to be spinners, all this stuff. David Ajabo, like Odafe Owe, those are not guys who really do that. And I think they kind of just started to go for speed in a way that just didn't really work for them. And I think that they couldn't figure out how to replenish the room in a way that they had for, 10 years before that. And so I think I think maybe it's a little bit of desperation, but I also do think that this is like you bring in Jesse Minter and you're like, how do we get his defense off the ground as quickly as possible? And I think if we consider both free agency and the likely trade market, like Maxx Crosby was the best player that you could get on the market. And so I think for them to go out and do that, also knowing like specifically with Minter's defense, how important it is to have a edge defender who can defend the run, like at a really high
100%.
level and set the edge like that. I think this is going to go a really long way for them for that specific reason.
That's where I land with this as well. The price is obviously huge and we can talk about it, but having a two-way guy that's going to be able to contribute on every single play. But at the same time, I don't think he'll play every single play for the Ravens defense the way he did with the Raiders. And that's kind of why I think the production, you actually on a per play basis might see him be more efficient and more impactful. And listen, you look at the numbers from last year, he was banged up. He was on an imploding team. Betting that you're going to see a better version of Maxx Crosby in 2026 than you did in 25, I completely understand that if you're the Ravens. So on a football level, I'm 100% with you, but you look at the price and you just look at history, and we just don't usually see stuff like this, Dave. I mean, 2 first-round picks, you look at the guys who've been traded for 2 first-round picks over the last 10, 15 years, you can go back for a little bit further than that. It's almost exclusively second contract players that are star-level guys. Micah Crosby. Micah Parsons last year is an easy example. We've got
Be a
plenty
hell
more
of a
of those.
player, Micah Crosby. Oh my
Micah
God.
Crosby would be, yeah, just think about it. Micah Crosby would be real good. So Micah Parsons last year, you have that example, Jamal Adams, Laramie Tunsil. These are guys that are second contract guys kind of hitting their prime. Maxx Crosby is going to be 29 years old. And so this is just a market we don't typically see. And Quinnen Williams is probably the closest analog when it comes to guys at this stage of their careers. Quinnen Williams goes for a 1 and a 2 to Dallas. Dallas was trying to send a 1 and a 2 to the Raiders for Maxx Crosby, and the Ravens because that offer is on the table, they have to top it, and that's how you get to this place where you're sending 2 first-round picks for a guy who's about to be 29 years old, and that's just not typically the type of move that we see anybody make.
Which I want to be clear, it's a little unprecedented for the Ravens. I said on Friday night that it's exciting, and it is undoubtedly exciting to add
Absolutely.
like a top 4 edge to your team, and we don't think the Ravens are going to be as bad as they looked at times last year. I don't love it. I can get as far as to say I like it for Baltimore because Lamar Jackson gives you a chance to be competitive. If you get this defense back to the level it was at a couple years ago, like we know the Ravens are good enough to be a big factor in the playoffs, potentially even have home field advantage throughout. Like that's not a pipe dream, but 2 first-round picks is such a lofty price to pay. And it's funny, I came to the opposite conclusion from the same amount of data as Derrik, because it's like, oh, Lamar Jackson is 29, 30 years old. This is the time to go for it. And I'm like, I don't know, man. This feels like the time where you want to have assets on hand to replenish things around Lamar Jackson. Like, if something goes wrong, if the offensive line isn't up to snuff, and to be clear, also, we don't know what the Ravens are going to wind up looking like yet. We still have the vast majority of free agency in the draft to go through. But if your offensive line is still a problem point, if your receiving weapons are a problem, which, spoiler alert, they kind of have been for a long time, if the Ravens can't get all of that right, all of a sudden you have that fewer resources and none of the big ones to fix it with. And when Lamar Jackson is 30 years old, that makes me a little bit nervous. Like you are putting a huge amount of onus on Maxx Crosby to be that dude with a capital D. Like if he's pretty good or like, yeah, like he's still great. then that's not good enough. Like, it's got to be defensive player of the year caliber type stuff to make this pay off. And it's not to say that it can't, but I think I said this last week, like, you're raising the threshold that much higher. And the other part of that too, you mentioned, is other teams were willing to do this and the Ravens leapfrogged them. I think you're right. Like, that is I think desperation comes with a negative connotation, but they were very adamant, very, very adamant to try to get this thing over the finish line. And it's, like I said, I think it's a high threshold. It's a high bar to clear when you're doing this type of stuff. And it makes me pretty nervous.
Price is the price, right? I mean, if a
Yes.
team is willing to give up a first and a second, and like you want them, like the price is the price.
But should you be willing to beat that? Like, should you be willing to beat the Dallas Cowboys in a bidding war? That would make me nervous if I were the Baltimore Ravens.
I would be, like, to have, I think especially, again, when you consider Minter's
Not
defense,
Derrick's money.
to have, right, it's not my money. But here's the other thing. I think I'm a little more like with team building, like scared money don't make money. Like, I'm going do shit like this, I think. And especially on defense, when you have like true field tilters like Roquan Smith, like Maxx Crosby, it just like changes the math for you on defense. We saw this with them before. Obviously, they have Kyle Hamilton as well. Like, when you have enough of those guys who are field tilting players, and if you have one of them at all three levels, if you get that on top of like Lamar Jackson, even playing at 90% of whatever his peak was, because last year he was like 60, you have a team that is again the top of the AFC. Like, this probably does hurt them for whatever they might look like in 2028, because you're obviously taking away first-round picks. But what is the chance that either of those first-round picks is even 75% of the player that Maxx Crosby is going to be for the next 3 years? And also, money-wise, if Maxx Crosby explodes, I think they can get out of this deal in like a year or two, and it doesn't really hurt them cap-wise. Like, I don't think that this is that bad for them.
I want to take the opportunity to point that out. And it's another layer of this too. And I think it's only fair to say, because the Ravens are one of those teams, they have a great reputation for good reason. I think a lot of the things they do tend to get seen through rose-colored glasses because you can see the logic and the process of it all. Robert, you already said it, but you wind up in this place because you haven't been drafting as well as the reputation suggests that you do. And I think that's worth pointing out, because every draft weekend, the Ravens take a guy with a name that we know who's not supposed to be there, and everybody freaks out about it. And to be fair to them, sometimes that's Kyle Hamilton, and they have definitely made some great picks. But you don't do this if you've been drafting as well over the last 3-5 years as the reputation suggests that you do.
Derrik pointing out that you're seeking out field tilters on defense. That, to me, speaks to the larger conversation about what this means for the Ravens and their overall construction at the end of this process. We're now at a place where for years and years and years, when the Ravens were in 2023, let's just say 2023, when the Ravens felt like their peak was as good as any other team in the NFL, other than Lamar Jackson, how many like superstar level players were on the Ravens? Roquan and Kyle Hamilton. And Kyle Hamilton was kind of ascending to that place, right? Like, on offense, they were the most efficient offense in football that year. 2024, they were the most efficient offense in football. It's just 2024. They're the most efficient offense in football in 2024. And it was Lamar and, maybe Tyler Linderbaum, but for the most part, it's not a star-laden team. That's how the Ravens have been competitive consistently for a while here, where you look across the roster and you're like, there's not a lot of star power, but there's not a lot of holes either. Like, it's just well constructed, and there are a lot of contributing pieces, and it all kind of makes sense together. This move specifically is pushing you in a slightly different direction, where that type of build, where you were solid across the board, but the peaks at the roster maybe weren't that high, never really got you there. And now you're at a place where this becomes very quickly very top-heavy football team. If you're looking at 2027, Lamar, Roquan, Madubuike, which is an entirely different conversation, Maxx Crosby, Kyle Hamilton, and then we want to throw Ronnie Stanley in there as well, but even if you didn't. So Jackson, Smith, Madubuike, Crosby, Hamilton. You have 5 guys who are going to be making $26 million a year against the cap. You have 2 guys making between $24 and $10 million a year. That's what the roster has become to an extent when you do something like this. And part of the reason is you feel like you're pushed to this place because the roster isn't quite as good top to bottom as it used to be, but this comes with risks. It's a different sort of mindset that comes with its own set of problems. And now you're in a place where after doing this, like Dave kind of alluded to, there's still a lot of holes on this team. You're probably not bringing back Tyler Linderbaum. You need at least one new guard. You probably need another pass catcher. You need another starting safety. You probably need, if not a starting outside corner, then some depth at outside corner. The Madubuike question looms. If he comes back, then your interior feels a lot better. But this is a team that it's not a Baltimore Ravens roster where you're looking at it on March 1st and thinking, they don't really have that many holes. They can kind of do whatever they want. That's not what this is. And so to see this type of a Baltimore team make this type of deal, I think it feels new coming from two different directions.
The fun thing is the quickness with which things can change. I mean, there's a lot of smoke and speculation about a Lamar extension. We've talked about it. If you can get him extended and free up that money to spend a little bit more than you might, then maybe the whole picture for this thing changes. And for that matter, we talked about it at the beginning of the offseason. If Nnamdi Madubuike comes back with a clean bill of health, I'm just going full Derrik, and I'll just jump right on the bandwagon and not even think about it. So there are some pretty big variables here that can still change. But right now, as we sit here on Sunday morning, I'm like, this is exciting, but I can't get all the way to love. Merely like.
The thing I'll say doesn't, and maybe I'm coping because I already like the deal anyway, doesn't them doing the deal feel weirdly optimistic for the Madubuike thing? Like, I think if they thought that he wasn't going to play for them, they might be in more of a spot where it's like, okay, maybe we do need to take a step back here. But if they think that he might be ready to go, then it's like, well, why don't we just load up and get another Maxx Crosby and throw it in?
We keep having the different reactions to the same stuff because I'm sitting here thinking, if they felt really good about Madubuike, they're like, okay, we've got an all-pro guy coming back to this line. We don't need to do anything nuts. We can probably draft or make some middle-of-the-pack signings that would get this thing up to snuff if Nnamdi is there. And trading for Maxx Crosby, to me, might signal, hey, we need a do-everything guy who can wreck shit on his own no matter what's going on with Madubuike. So, and to be clear, I have no idea what is going on.
Right, neither do I.
Yeah, that's where I sit too. I'm not even going to speculate. I have absolutely no idea. When you look at the finances of it, they're currently $12 million over the cap. If you look at over the cap, they're going to do something to Lamar's contract, right? Like it's whether if he doesn't get an extension, then they're probably going to restructure it. If they take it down to zero, they would have like $26 million in cap space. There's some other things they can do as well. And I'll be curious, do they touch Crosby's contract? Because as Derrik alluded to, there's no guaranteed money left on that deal, I think, at all. And so if they want to just restructure that thing, it's $30 million in base salary. That'll give them a little bit more wiggle room. And again, it feels like you're kind of compromising on the way that you want to do things on a couple different levels here. But maybe we're just in that place where they understand they have to do that. Because if they can free up a decent amount of cap space, then you can find a starter at center, a starter at guard. You go out and find a safety, maybe a corner. Like they might have the financial flexibility to shop in that middle-class tier of players to fill some of those holes. But it's just a different conversation about the Baltimore Ravens than the one I thought we'd be having. The last point here I think I want to make is that some people are going to look at the Cowboys being willing to deal a 1 and a 2 for Maxx Crosby a year after trading Micah Parsons and be like, what the hell? Like, you didn't want to keep Micah, but you were willing to do something like this for a guy who's 3-4 years older. Two things I would say about that. Like we talked about with the contract. Because that contract already exists, the cash payout is just going to be a lot different with Micah Parsons than it is with Maxx Crosby. I think with Micah, the first 2 years in cash was like $85 million. With Maxx, I think it's $60 million. And so that just gives you a big chunk of change to work with to spend on other players if you're Dallas or if you're a team like Baltimore here. And the other thing, and this came up a lot in conversations with coaches, for personnel people at the Combine consistently, and it wasn't even about Micah necessarily. It touched on a bunch of different players, but I think from people in our seats, we underrate how important it is for teams and for people in those buildings, for the guys they pay the most amount of money to be the guys who set the culture in those buildings. And I think with Dallas, whether you like it or not, they did not see Micah Parsons as that sort of guy. Maxx Crosby is that sort of guy. Maxx Crosby is the sort of guy where if you're paying him $30 million a year and you watch the effort and everything else, you're like, that's who we want to be on that side of the ball. And again, I'm not sure how much that should play a factor, whether we over-index for that and how teams make these decisions. But if you're trying to compare the Crosby situation with the Micah Parsons situation, I think that element of it at least needs to be acknowledged to understand why Dallas would do A and not B.
Never underestimate the importance of relationships inside the building. And if I haven't been clear enough about that, I apologize. Because, yeah, the relationships with Micah in Dallas were not good by the end, clearly. And I mean, it doesn't get to that point if they're better. But I will say, in defense of the Cowboys, and it's a moot point because it didn't happen, you can't decide who wins until you see the big picture 2, 3, 4 years from now. But, like, if the Cowboys had managed to trade Micah and use those resources to get Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, Maxx Crosby, and still hold on to at least one first-round pick and not be without first-round picks in any of those years, you can't say that they would have been the winners in that situation, but I would have called that pretty nice. Like, I would have looked at that and been like, oh, they kind of cooked here. But it doesn't matter.
They would have given away 2 twos in that scenario, though. I mean, they still gave up more than they got. Yeah.
To come out with Quinnen Williams and Maxx Crosby and not have gotten rid of a 1 to do it, though, is, I mean, I think if it weren't the Cowboys, I think we'd be saying some pretty nice stuff about that.
I think it's more so just that, again, I've said this a bunch about the Quinnen Williams stuff. The Quinnen Williams trade wasn't free. You know, like you're still paying a lot to get those guys, even if you can still hang on to your first-round picks as part of the calculus. All right, don't have to spend a ton of time on this. Not surprising. I think they still had a need at this position because guys like this were hitting free agency. They did a very similar thing last year. But Derrik, Khalil Mack back to the Los Angeles Chargers. 1 year, $18 million, just running it back for 1 more year.
They should have, right? Like, I kind of thought it would have been fun to see Khalil Mack on like a different contender, but in my mind, the Chargers are still a roster that is obviously going to be a playoff team, and so him just kind of returning there, keeping the stable on defense. That's a playoff team. Like, come on, like that's a playoff team.
No Jesse Minter. You know,
They'll be fine.
Just, you know, it's worth having a conversation.
I trust the Jim and Justin offense over there.
The only reason that my response to this wasn't just wholly positive is kind of like, it's fun to watch players change teams. Like that's the only element of this that just doesn't look at it and be like, good for them, good for him.
No, that's why, like, I had the same reaction as Derrik, but it made me laugh when I was examining it because I saw the news and I was like, oh, that's kind of boring, isn't it? And then I thought about it and I was like, Khalil Mack re-signed with a team that's been at the playoffs 2 years in a row. Like if he had gone to a different team that's been at the playoffs 2 years in a row, I would think it was very exciting. So good for the Chargers, even if it's kind of anticlimactic on Monday.
Yeah, and they had arguably one of the biggest edge needs in the entire league if you currently look at their roster. I mean, we talked about this last week. I mean, it's Tuli Tuipulotu and not much else with Odafe Oweh and Khalil Mack hitting free agency. And they've got more money to spend. We'll get to the other kind of move that they made over the last few days here in a second when we talk about the interior offensive line market. But even with Biadasz in the fold, even with Khalil Mack in the fold, this is a team that is still going to be able to spend, whether it's an edge rusher, interior offensive line. They've got a lot of money to throw around. A team that has less money to throw around, but nonetheless kind of started the domino effect we're going to see with these interior offensive line markets. Connor McGovern signs back with the Buffalo Bills, 4 years, $52 million. I believe it's $32 million guaranteed. You look at that contract by AAV, it slots behind only Creed Humphrey and Cam Jurgens, now with Drew Dahlman out of the mix, RIP. And not surprised, based on this market, how many teams might have been interested in him. But still, Derrik, $13 million a year for Connor McGovern is a healthy number as we kind of kick off the spending with this center group and the interior offensive line group in general.
The Connor McGovern deal is like, this to me, I know we tried to put him on 8 million other teams because there's 8 million teams that need a center, and he was, other than Tyler Linderbaum, going to be the best one on the market.
That's why he's getting $13 million a year.
Exactly. That's why he's getting $13 million a year. But I love this for Buffalo because to me, if you're going to, one, they are losing offensive line coach Aaron Kromer, like he left. Mm-hmm. And I think to me, if you are promoting the offensive coordinator to be your head coach, I think it helps him a lot if you can keep one of the pillars of your offense in place in your center and like take some of the mental load off of the offense a little bit and let Joe Brady do some of the head coaching stuff that is now going to be on his plate. And so I think keeping continuity there was, I think if they had to pick between one of these two interior offensive linemen, like regardless of which one you think is the better player purely on quality, McGovern was probably more important to keeping their like overall continuity and level of play.
You lose 2 starters and your offensive line coach, 2 starters including the center in a given offseason. It's a lot of stability that's walking out the door. And so being able to maintain some of that while losing Cromer, I completely agree. And we can have a conversation about which of those guys is a better player or more valuable in a vacuum. David Edwards is going to get more money in free agency because he's a guard, but I always, and Barnwell would just hammer this into my brain over and over and over again 10 years ago when we were having these conversations and he was always right and I was always wrong. He would talk about the multi-year outlook for guys when it comes to how much they're worth in free agency. And we're going back a while now with David Edwards, but Connor McGovern signed as a starting guard for the Bills when he got there in free agency a couple years ago. David Edwards signed for a few $1,000,000 a year as a depth piece, and now is going to be getting $15 million a year on a third contract. And so I think that on multiple different levels, the fact that McGovern is the one that they wanted to shell out for at the end of this, Dave, I don't necessarily find surprising.
No, and I think it's an expensive win, but for all the reasons y'all just outlined, I think it's a win for the Bills that maybe this is more a perception thing, but it just feels like they needed it. Like you're cutting guys left and right on your defense to get your finances right. Some of that justified. People have been crushing the Bills for the DJ Moore trade for the last couple days, and to get one of your 2 guys, because yeah, like you lose both of them, I do think that is a very big deal for the Buffalo offense, and to retain the center who has so much to do with setting protections and helping the quarterback and kind of being the quarterback of your offensive line typically. If there's a guy that you were going to hold on to as a team that has a decent amount of retooling to do, I think it's a big, big win. And again, maybe this is a perception thing, but it feels like a culture win to get it done before the market opens as well. To like go to a player that knows that he's about to hit the market and be like, can we get something done? What's a good price? And the player agrees to it without needing to hit the market and have competing teams send in offers for him. Like clearly Connor McGovern likes Buffalo enough to want to be there and want to be part of this coaching change with Joe Brady. Like I said, maybe that's more perception than anything, but from the outside, it feels like it matters to me that you're able to hang on to that guy 3 or 4 days ahead of time and before he's in line to have a bidding war for his services. Because clearly that would have happened based on the price that the Bills gave him and what we know Tyler Linderbaum's going to be worth in a few days. He probably could have made more money if that was what really mattered to him, but re-signing with Buffalo was something he clearly prioritized.
I know it's tempting to like shit all over the Bills offense and what they were at the end of the year. The Bills finished 4th in offensive DVOA last season. 4th.
It's the 3 superstar quarterbacks are in a spot where if they don't have the best offense in the league every single week, we're like, what is wrong with them? And that was what it was with the Bills.
Obviously, there were issues with this team. We talked about it. The pass catching group by the end of the season was just nightmarish. But now, when you bring back Connor McGovern and you trade for DJ Moore, we can hem and haw about the price, and I totally understand that. I think it's an aggressive trade, the one that they pulled off for DJ Moore. But if you just look at the roster right now, you essentially have the 2025 Bills offense that finished 4th in offensive DVOA with DJ Moore, and you have to figure out a starting left guard. Like, if they can somehow piece that together with a guy who's maybe going to make half as much money as David Edwards will in free agency, and you can get passable play at that spot, that's really now the only piece that you're turning over, an offense that was very good, and now DJ Moore is in the fold. So this sort of move, when you just look at the roster and the depth chart in totality, it's like, all right, man, like I can get behind like what this thing looks like now when you have all of the good elements for the most part of this thing coming back, and you add, if an expensive player in DJ Moore, one you absolutely did not have when you think about the skill set you're adding to the offense.
This to me feels like, yeah, if they go and sign like Chris Paul to play left guard or something, just a guy who can get it done. And then you have DJ Moore who can actually play wide receiver and win some one-on-ones in a way you couldn't before. It's like the offense is probably better.
All right. That's a fair point, but that brings me to the next deal I want to talk about because I think we're at a point where Chris Paul might be a little bit more expensive than you want him to be. Packers re-signing Sean Rhyan, per Ian Rappaport, 3 years, $33 million on a deal that can get to $39 million for Sean Rhyan. We'll see about guarantees. You know, the Packers are one of those teams where the guarantees don't go quite as far into the deal as some other teams. Like the Aaron Banks contract last year is a perfect example where the AAV is like $19 million, but if you actually look under the hood, it's not quite as strong of a deal as some other contracts with that AAV at the position might be. But nonetheless, even if it can be a tiny bit misleading, 3 years, $33 million for Sean Rhyan, I think it kind of speaks to what we were dancing around with the interior offensive line market last week, which was these guys on second contracts that are hitting free agency. Like, if they can chew gum and block somebody at the same time, like they're going to be getting way more money than you probably think. And I think that Sean Rhyan, Dave, is kind of like the first shot across the bow here when we think about what that market is going to look like over the next week.
Which let me, as the non-Bears fan, say this so that it sounds objective. My main takeaway from a lot of what's happened over the last 3 days is, damn, the Bears got some really good intel when they decided to trade a future 5 for Garrett Bradbury on Friday, because that deal comes down, and you know, I spent 30 minutes on Thursday trying to convince you they should go after Tyler Linderbaum. That deal comes down, and it's like, well, what are they doing? Like, these better centers are about to hit the market, and you can do much better than Garrett Bradbury, even if he had a nice season for the Patriots. Like, he's only under contract for 1 more year. What's going on? And all in quick succession, I don't think we mentioned Tyler Biadasz is a Charger now for $10 million a year. I think our guess was maybe like 7. And Connor McGovern is a Bill again for $13 million a year. I think our guess was like 10. And now Sean Ryan's getting $11 million a year, or however the math winds up going, but a $33 million contract. So I look at that and I'm like, trading a future 5 for a serviceable guy with 1 year left on his deal, not a bad bit of business for the Chicago Bears if you're trying to stay out of what is clearly going to be a very expensive market if this weekend is any indicator.
I'll say this, the Biadasz and McGovern contracts are about what I expected them to be. So if you look at those two prices, like I thought McGovern would come in at that sort of number if Linderbaum was going to make $20 million a year. And when we were talking about Tyler Linderbaum on the show last week, I said it over and over and over again. I'd rather have Biadasz for half. I'd rather have Biadasz for half. It's exactly half of $20 million. And so those contracts came in about where I thought they'd be. But these are guys that have multiple years of proven track records as starters. Sean Rhyan started 7 games for the Packers last year at center. And so that's the one that I feel like is just a little bit richer than I expected it to be. The market overall with the Biadasz and the McGovern deals, that's settled about where I thought. And I'll be honest with you, the Bradbury thing, I think given the market constraints and given the spot that you're in and given the skill set that you're seeking out, I joked about this when the deal happened with you guys, but it almost feels like the Peter Parker glasses meme, like Tyler Linderbaum and Garrett Bradbury, like that's where we're at. Like they're very, and even Dahlman. Like if you look at the mock draftable, like spider charts for centers, Dahlman and Garrett Bradbury are the two most similar when it comes to like size, athletic ability, everything else. So them seeking this out is not surprising. I'm fine with this being the outcome, but I'll tell you this, when I saw the 3 years, $30 million for Biadasz with the Chargers, I was like, God damn it. That was it. Like that was the sweet spot, man. Like, and the Chargers pulling that off again, a good player, like clears the bar. Absolutely, you can win with him starting center as an above average starter. To get that for $10 million before the market even opens, not chew into any sort of comp pick situation because he was cut. Like that is a win for the Chargers. I was excited to see that for them, and I'm surprised that Washington didn't try to get at least something for him. And when it comes to a pick, because there was clearly a healthy market for Biadasz, and that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about them just cutting him instead of trying to get something out when you knew like 6 teams were going to try to need a new center this year. Like that just
he had 3 visits immediately before the weekend was even out. He had 3 visits set up.
Exactly. Like the only thing I find interesting, and not in a bad way, about the Chargers signing Biadasz is I think Mike McDaniel's offenses have been a little bit more used to having guys who are a little bit smaller, a little bit leaner, a little bit quicker, and Biadasz is not that. Biadasz is all of 315 pounds and like a more burly kind of knock him around type of center. So I'm just kind of curious to see what the run game ends up looking like for that reason. But obviously, I trust that offensive staff is going to get it to work out. The Bradbury one is funny. When I looked at it initially, I was like, player's not good enough. Like Bradbury's just not good enough. But then I'm like, dude, he's playing next to maybe the best guard duo in the league.
That's it.
It'll probably be fine. Like I was like, he's not that. If he's center 22, but he's playing next to the best guard duo in the league, it's probably going to turn out pretty good.
I think it's just covering your ass. Like, I think that's what this is, where you get a guy. It's a $5.7 million against the cap this year for Garrett Bradbury. And so you're looking at that compared to the deals that you're going to have to sign guys to in free agency. And again, I assume they'll address this at some point on day 2 in the draft, or maybe even a little bit later. Day 2 is probably rich, consider. I know I've looked at the draft centers a million times. I know that they're probably like outside the top 100 in the 4th round, but I assume that the Bears will address this at some point with a lot of the day 2 to mid-round picks that they have in this draft. But now that guy doesn't have to hit for you. That's the whole point of doing something like this, is like, if we have to get by with Garrett Bradbury for a year at center because of the quality of the other guys on your offensive line, because of the scheme, and being able to, I think, plan around some of his limitations, I think that you absolutely can live with Garrett Bradbury for a single year. And that's why I like this move at the price it costs them.
I deeply love it. And like I said, if I were the Bears, I'd rather have just knocked that out for a small price than venture into these bidding war waters, which, to go back to the original point, I get it if it's a little rich, but in Sean Rhyan, a guy who can serviceably start for you and can play as many as 3 positions on the open market, that's probably
Packers
worth $1 million.
love that, man.
It's worth $1 million, or it's worth $11 million. So, I mean, great for him.
The last thing I'd say about the Bears and stopgaps, the other bit of news that I think should be of note to them, Taylor Decker asking for his release from the Lions and potentially being on the market. Obviously not the player he was a couple years ago, has been dealing with tons of health concerns. I mean, there's a reason that he was openly talking about retirement in December. But if you're a team like the Bears in the situation that they're in, it's very similar to the Garrett Bradbury conversation, where it's like, we did not expect on December 15th, we did not expect to need a new left tackle and a new center for the 2026 season. Let's just do what we can to get by for this year, and then we'll be able to address it. Taylor Decker at the right price and the connection with Ben Johnson, all of that, I think that is a reasonable solution to that problem if he does end up hitting the market. So, I mean, he would make sense for the Bears. I'm sure he'd make sense for a couple different teams that just need a stopgap player at that position, but 100% worth monitoring. And now if you're the Lions, you're going to need to be relying on that offensive line development pipeline that you were trying to put in place a couple years ago. You know, they drafted Giovanni Manu. They traded up to get him. That was clearly kind of a multi-year plan where he's raw. Can we get him to the place he needs to be when Decker moves on? That time is now, Derrik. The hourglass is run out here when it comes to the Lions needing to figure out who the next steps are for pretty much all of that offensive line, except for Penei Sewell, that really drove who they were a couple years ago.
Yeah, like in my mind now, Taylor Decker is going to be like what Jonah Williams has been the past couple of years, where it's just like a guy who is barely passable starter. He can just get by for us, and that'll be enough, which the Bears at left tackle, I think they would absolutely take that. With the Lions, I'm curious if they believe in Manu enough, if they think he's developed enough to go and start, or do they want to flip Penei Sewell to left tackle, which is like, I don't know if
unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I would not want to do that. Like, I understand, you can see the logic, right? Of like, left tackle is in theory more valuable. We've seen certain guys do that before, but he's already the best right tackle in the league and like a true difference maker for you. You don't want to take him from an A+ player to like even an A- or B+ player. Like, I would just rather keep him where he's at.
I think the thing with this is it's potentially not even about a commentary on, is he ready? I think my bigger question is this a move about him being ready, or is this a move purely about money? It seems like this move is mostly about money. And so does that send you to a place as we head toward the season here where you don't love your options, but you also couldn't live with Taylor Decker at that price anymore?
My only pushback on that, Derrik, would be I said all the same stuff about Tristan Wirfs when the Bucs moved him to the left side, and it worked out awesome. And, when you have a freak like that, those are the types of guys you can typically ask to make the switch and have it pay off. So I got that in the back of my mind. Like, I typically agree with you that I don't want to ask guys to move and potentially get worse at a position, but Penei Sewell might be the type of freak who can do it and all of a sudden look like a top 5 left tackle.
That is a good point. Tristan Wirfs did make the switch in, like,
Tristan
almost
Wirfs made
even
it
got
look
better.
He made it look effortless. He's like, what?
Yeah.
It's hard to just flip across the line and play the toughest position on the offensive line and be an all-pro at it? Says who?
A little bit of breaking news as we're recording this. It's 11:51 a.m. Central Time, by the way, as we're kind of sorting through everything that's happening here. Justin Strnad, who's about to hit free agency, back to the Broncos, 3 years, $18 million for Justin Strnad. It's interesting. It was the exact deal that Alex Singleton signed in 2023 to come to the Broncos was 3 years, $18 million. So obviously with, inflation, it's a slight step down from there. They're really, I guess the closest comparison would probably be the deal that Malik Harrison signed for the Steelers last year, which was 2 years, $10 million. It was $5 million a year. That's kind of what this feels like, Derrik. Like, if that's now the market for third linebackers, that's what Strnad kind of is for the Broncos, where Malik Harrison is a situational kind of guy. He's not going to be able to play for you every single down. Strnad is a fantastic blitzer, but his skill set is fairly limited when it comes to being a do-it-all kind of guy. So slotting in about for where a guy like Harrison would be with cap inflation, I actually kind of think that makes sense when you consider a market for somebody like this.
And I think this, to me, too, is like the type of contract that covers your ass in the sense of, like, it's not an obscene amount of money to pay for a quality move around third linebacker, but also in the event that they can't get something done with Alex Singleton and they don't like whoever they end up drafting to replace him, he can just start and we can get by with it and it'll be fine. And that's a decent amount of money to pay there. So that feels just like we're familiar with him. We're going to keep it consistent. If he's a little bit of an expensive third linebacker, that's fine. And if he's our second linebacker, that's also fine.
Speaking of that tier of linebacker, it's a step up, but I think a lot of the same thinking applies to this deal that we're going to talk about now. Packers trade for Zaire Franklin. Deal Colby Wooden to the Colts for Zaire Franklin. You look at the remaining money on Franklin's deal, it's essentially 2 years, $15 million, which, again, you're comparing that to what Strnad just got, and I assume Green Bay, part of the reason they're willing to do something like this, talking about the linebacker version of the Garrett Bradbury sort of contract, it's that, well, we know what Quay Walker is going to cost. He came back to us with a number. Not sure we're willing to go there. There's a chance that this move for Zaire Franklin, Derrik, is maybe half of what Quay Walker is going to get on the open market. And I think you can make an argument that with Jonathan Gannon, was with with Zaire Franklin in Indianapolis, there's some familiarity there. I think as we just want stability and we want it at the right price sort of move, I can totally understand this for Green Bay.
I actually love this move. I still have some questions about, like, who the hell is playing defensive tackle for this team, and obviously
that's where we're going next here,
right? They're changing things around a little bit scheme wise. Like, I think they need a guy who's a little bit more of a nose guard than some of the other guys, but they still are so thin that I think it's hard for them to say that they can afford trading away anybody in that room. But again, if you are trying to save money at linebacker, which if Quay Walker's number gets up to 14, 15, $16 million a year, Zaire Franklin is not quite the level of player that Walker can be at his peak, but I think he's a really good hammer, like, between the tackles. And so you're going to lose maybe a little bit of something in coverage, but I think as like an enforcer downhill between the tackles, pretty nice player to pair with Edgerrin Cooper. So I'm kind of into it as like their best veteran answer to replacing Quay Walker. Like, they could have done it in the draft. They maybe could have signed some other guys, but I think this is actually a really good answer.
Very similar to the Garrett Bradbury trade. I love a creative answer to a problem where, like, I don't think Zaire Franklin is as good, or at least his potential at this point in his career is not as high as Quay Walker's, but what are the prices? And considering what I think Quay Walker is going to be worth, trading a player for a guy who can play and occasionally at a high level, we'll see what's around him by the time we get there, but I feel fine plugging Zaire Franklin into that and knowing the baseline's probably going to be pretty good. And you didn't have to give up a ton to get him, and now you can avoid bidding for higher priced players next week. I think it's great.
Zaire Franklin's going to be 30, right? It's not like Zaire Franklin is 100 years old. Like, he should still have a little bit left in the tank, especially on the deal that you're giving him.
I think that's good. Because how many times have we said, like, this roster, oh, it's so young, all this stuff. I actually think there's a little bit of value of getting guys they've done this a little bit longer. They're a little bit more mature. They're a little bit more
especially at that
up.
position.
especially at that position when the guy next to him is like 24 years old and still a little bit young.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I understand the logic completely. But it's funny the things we talk ourselves into where it's like, damn it, we're too young. We need a 30-year-old in here. Like that is it's typically the opposite of what we say about all roster building. But I see the logic.
Last kind of headline grabbing move that I want to talk about here before we get out. The Eagles give a contract extension to Jordan Davis, 3 years, $78 million. For Jordan Davis. That's a $26 million AAV with $65 million guaranteed reportedly. Very similar to the deal that Milton Williams signed last offseason. Exact same AAV. Guarantees come in about the same number. Milton Williams' deal was longer, but I mean, you're looking at it, only Chris Jones right now has a higher AAV among interior defensive linemen than Jordan Davis just got from the Eagles. And even if you account for some cap increase and cap inflation, that's a really healthy deal. And I don't know, Derrik. I mean, I can understand it based on the player he was last year, that Jordan Davis is commanding a lot of money, but you rewind like a year ago. The idea that we'd be having this conversation on March 8th of 2025 and Jordan Davis would be worth $26 million a year, I think really speaks to the strides we saw from him as a player and just in how often he was on the field last year.
That's the biggest thing, is that he was on the field more. Like, I think when we all saw him in college, we were like, oh my God, there are just not very many defensive tackles built like this. But even in college, there were some, he was maybe a little bit too big, some of the conditioning issues. You were like, how long can he sustain this? And that was, for the first 2 or 3 years of his career, true. Like, he was really good for the 40% of snaps that he could play, but now him bumping up to 65%, I think he was a better pass rusher this year than he had been at any other point in his career, and so I think that helps you. Also, like, small thing for him, he was kick ass on special teams, like blocked a number of kicks for them this year, which is a nice little bump. He was just
the odds for you bringing that up and not Dave in this conversation were off the board in Vegas.
I would have gotten there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure he would have. And then the last thing that I would say too, and we kind of talked about this a little bit with Crosby and Micah. The fact that we are getting so many swirling rumors about, are the Eagles going to trade Jalen Carter? Are they not going to pay Jalen Carter? And you go and pay an obscene amount of money to Jordan Davis? That says something to me. That says something.
Well, that's such a good shout. If you're you're not watching, if you're listening to this, Robert is doing the Windhorst. What does this mean, fingers?
And what does this mean? If the fact that they did this before extending Jalen Carter, and now you're attributing this amount of money to your defense, I think the reports are that they might want to bring Jalen Phillips back, which is going to be a really healthy number. Somebody's going to be the odd man out here. And Jeremy Fowler from ESPN reported, I can't keep the timeline straight, it was either last night or this morning, that teams have called about Jalen Carter. And that's not necessarily surprising when you see this sort of deal. There were some reports that they had made him available in the Maxx Crosby conversations that the Eagles might have been having. So Carter's extension eligible after his third year. His fifth-year option would cost $27 million because of where he was drafted and because he made a Pro Bowl. He's coming off a season where, and this is what worries me, when you have a procedure on both of your shoulders during a season, I mean, he was open about this. Apparently, he couldn't do a push-up at points this year, and you saw that. I mean, it really kind of came to, the nadir of it was when you watched him play against the Bears in that Black Friday game, he just couldn't play. I mean, you just saw the fact that he just could not be out there. So how much of an issue is that? How much do the Eagles know about that? So, Dave, there clearly is some smoke here with Jalen Carter and how available he might be, and that throws a wrench into the interior defensive line market this offseason in particular, where there just are not a lot of guys available.
It's very classic Howie Roseman being ahead of the problem. And maybe Jalen Carter were to get dealt imminently, or maybe this is just anticipating what could be a problem a year from now. But you get Jordan Davis under contract, all of a sudden that's a little bit less scary. And I know they have different roles. Obviously, they do different things, but just having that piece of your defensive line. And if you're banking on Jordan Davis continuing to be this guy, which I just wanted to say, what a cool story that I think probably went undernoticed on a larger level just because the Eagles were a super frustrating team. And typically when you're talking about the Eagles, it's like, why aren't they better? But Jordan Davis kind of reinventing himself into a Peloton guy and just being the slimmest
Listen,
6'6", 300 and whatever pound defensive tackle. Yeah, Robert, you can relate to that.
you don't have to tell me.
And like it's badass because there was so much talk about him as a prospect, like, oh, he's too big to stay on the field. He's gonna eat his way out of the league or just be too heavy to be a viable NFL player. And he's just a monster now. Like, he is a svelte nose tackle, which isn't supposed to happen. And he was phenomenal last year. Like I said, I think it got buried under the angst about the Eagles, but a very, very cool story. Happy for him. And now, even if they're different players, like I said, it's less intimidating trying to replace Jalen Carter if he's there doing his thing in the middle of that line. So not to say Carter's future in Philly is over, but like I said, it's a hallmark of Howie Roseman to be like 8 to 12 months ahead of what might happen. And that's kind of what this looks like.
Peloton has to fold this into their marketing in some way.
They should.
It's use Peloton to make $26 million a year.
As soon as that video came out of him talking about, he's like, yeah, like, I already worked out today. We had practice and I'm just going to go hop on my Peloton. I was like, well, that's marketing right there. Let's get that into a commercial.
Last big deal that I wanted to hit before we got out of here. It feels like this happened 10 days ago, but I think it was on Friday. Cam Curl back with the Los Angeles Rams. 3 years, $36 million, $24 million guaranteed. Not surprising when you think about the Rams having some financial wiggle room. The fact that now bringing him back, Derrik, you got to feel pretty good about what that secondary is going to look like. You have Quentin Lake at safety if that's where you want to play him. You know, obviously we're going to have some flexibility there with Trent McDuffie, but now you got Lake, Trent McDuffie, Cam Curl all in the fold here. The interesting thing to me is more so what this means about the market at the position, because there were some questions about what that was going to look like. I mean, we talked about it a lot last week, but if you look at a lot of the outlets that were trying to guess these things, there was a wide range for safety in particular. I think Cam Curl is very indicative of that. The PFF numbers had him at like $9-ish million a year. I think our guy Daniel Popper here at The Athletic had him closer to like 14 or 15. It sits in at 12, and I think that is going to be a number that's worth keeping in mind when you look at what some of these other safeties are potentially going to make next week.
All right, and him getting 12, who I believe now a third contract player for him. He's a little bit older than some of the other guys that might sign. I think some of the younger guys like a Brian Cook, they are probably going to now get up to 14, 15, 16 million, I would guess, based on what Cam Curl has done. But
it's a lot of money, man.
It's a lot of money. And there is Cam Curl to me compared to some of the other safeties. It's just like, I don't know, man. There is such a stability to his game that I absolutely love. And so for the Rams to bring him back, and then kind of like you mentioned, allows them more flexibility with Quentin Lake. Because like I could have envisioned the world where they let Curl walk. They just move Lake to safety. McDuffie's your nickel. We figure it out at outside corner. But that kind of locks you into that. And I think we've seen maybe teams taking a little bit of, the blueprint of what the Seahawks just did with them being able to shuffle around some of their corners, and also what the Ravens have done for a very long time with Kyle Hamilton in some of their corners and Marlon Humphrey sometimes being a nickel and sometimes not. I think teams are kind of taking that blueprint a little bit, and so I think the Rams trying to make sure that they keep those avenues open, I think, is a pretty good option for them.
Yeah, you look at it now. I mean, with Curl, you still have Cam Kinchens in the fold. Obviously, they bring back Quentin Lake. If you want to play Quentin Lake in the nickel, when you're in nickel and you have McDuffie on the outside and then you can figure out that other outside corner spot. I mean, this group is in a very good spot, especially compared to where they were last year, even with a guy like Kobe Durant hitting free agency. So this Rams team they're addressing the potential issues that this roster was going to have, as they know just how much is riding on this season. And so it's not surprising to see them show a little bit of urgency in making sure that group comes together in a way that it did not by the end of last year.
Not surprised, but I am disappointed that your rundown doesn't include the Niners signing Eddie Pinheiro to a 4-year, $17 million extension. Like, I hate to be a caricature of myself, but you just leave me no choice when you're trying to leave out major re-signings like Eddie Pinheiro to the 49ers, which I mainly just think it's funny. Eddie Pinheiro was great last year. Like, he was 28 of 29. He was fantastic, but it's funny to me that the Niners got out from under the Jake Moody fiasco and immediately were like, let's tie ourselves to another kicker for the long term. Like, I don't know. Eddie Pinheiro played great, but did the Niners have to rush out and do this? Was my main response to that deal.
I mean, just your buddy that has had terrible, terrible relationship luck for way too long and then just throws himself into the first thing that comes along.
Yeah, like you can be single for a little while. Like that's okay if you're just getting out of something. But
enjoy yourself.
The Niners disagree.
The entire Shanahan's whole tree thing, their whole thing with kickers is just, I don't want to think about them anymore. And so the fact that he for a little bit didn't have to think about them, just like send it off. We're good.
I'm rooting for Eddie Pinheiro to stay that good, but I thought it was a funny decision by the 49ers.
All right. That's all we've got for today. Again, this will be up a little bit later on Sunday. We're going to give this a little bit of breathing room before our live stream that starts tomorrow at 12 p.m.
Wait. We can't sign off without talking about the hair. Like we can leave it till the end.
Come on, it doesn't need to be addressed.
You don't want to address the hair on the live stream for the first time because, like, we have all of our friends coming on. Like, they're gonna say something about it.
It's not that complicated of a thing. I'd had the same haircut for a very long time. I was bored of it. I wanted to do something a little bit different. I didn't know what a shorter middle ground might look like, and so my thought was, you know what? F it. I'm just gonna take it all off. I've done it before. I know my head isn't weird. And we're just going to figure out what we want to do on the way back to where I was.
What an insane sentence. I know my head
isn't weird.
If you have not ever done this.
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
And there's so many things that can go awry. There's so many different reasons that this could be a bad choice. I did this a lot when I was young. I did it in college consistently. And so I knew that the downside was only so low. So I was like, you know what? I just wanted to change a pace. That was really it. That's all. I came back. I came home. I had told my wife this was possible. Okay. I had been dancing around it for years. Like legitimately, the first time this ever came up was after our wedding in 2023. And we were going on our honeymoon. And I was like, you know what? I just want to take it all off post-wedding. Like, I just don't want to deal with it anymore. It's going to be for the summer. Let's do it. And so I didn't spring this on her, but I did not confirm before I left for the haircut on Friday that I was going to do it. And so I just rolled back into the house with this. And she said, it's like those videos of babies that see their dads without beards for the first time. Like, that's how I feel right now.
Incredible that you just went in blind with your wife. That's fantastic.
Bold.
That is bold.
She's coming around on it. She's warming up to it because she's getting used to it.
She doesn't have a choice. It looks
fine.
I mean,
no,
yeah,
it looks
I think
fine.
It looks great,
looks
but
fine.
it's a shock. It's a culture shock, you know?
I wouldn't go in blind with my fiance. I would give her a heads up, hey, it's gonna look different when I come back to the house. But hey, that's
I
okay.
didn't know. I honestly didn't know. When I left, I did not know I was gonna do it. I got there, sat down. The stylist that I work with, her name is Izzy. She's been great. I've known her for years and years and years. We had a real conversation about it. I was like, I'm considering doing this. What do you think? And she's like, why don't we take it halfway down and then you can make a decision. And she took it halfway down. I was like, I'm ready. Just do it. Just let's get rid of it. So that's where we're at.
I think we should do at least one episode where Derrik lets all of his hair down. And then I'll coif my thing up as good as possible, and we'll have all 3 stages of hair growth on one podcast.
Dave, you know this. Part of the reason for this is there was no if I'm not wearing a hat, I had to do it. There was no intermediate step where I just didn't have to pay attention to it. And so now the fact that I don't have to worry about it at all for a while, I'm really looking forward to that. And so that was part of it. Part of it was laziness.
I understand the appeal of that, but I don't know. I'm too afraid of not having my hair. It's too valuable to what I've got going on.
There is part of me as a 38-year-old man that it's what if it doesn't grow back? But that's not how science works.
Yeah, that's I
understand that it's going to grow back.
It'll stop when it stops. It's not really about when you decide to cut it.
I pride myself on not being superstitious, but I think I've said 3 superstitious things on the show this week. So maybe I'm more superstitious than I give myself credit for because I can't risk it not growing back.
Sometimes you're pushed into a place of desperation. Me with my hair, the Ravens trading for Maxx Crosby. You're making decisions that are not optimized, but you feel like that's what you have to do in the moment, and that's where we are.
Bringing it back on the tracks. There we go.
That's all we've got for today. Like we mentioned, tomorrow, or if you're listening to this on Monday morning, today, March 9th, Monday, 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Eastern. I've been saying it in Central Time because we schedule things on Central Time. I understand that's probably not how I should be talking about it. The people in the Discord were a little bit annoyed, and I totally understand this. There was a listener from the UK who was like, you can't ask me to know that.
They only need get to learn one time zone, and they base it all
you
off
can't
that.
ask
Totally
me to
fair.
know that. Totally fair. So 12 p.m. Eastern on Monday, March 9th, we will be starting our free agency live stream. 15, 16 guests going to be coming on over that 5-hour stretch. One of my favorite days of the entire year. Encourage you guys to come by, spend the day with us, spend the time. We'll be doing it from the studio. Derrik's flying in today. Very much looking forward to it. For now, that's all we got. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.